Welcome to Leominster Access Television. My name is Bob Saudelli of the Leominster Historical Commission. Today we are pleased to welcome Mrs. Audrey Johnson and Mr. Nick Donfro, who will share with us some of their memories of growing up in the Leominster neighborhood of North Leominster. Welcome, Audrey and Nick, to another in our series of interviews called Leominster, A Present to the Future, where folks who grew up in the neighborhoods of the city, those neighborhoods identified by the various signs which are in the process of being installed by Department of Public Works Director Pat LaPointe and the DPW at the Mayor's initiative, where folks who grew up in those neighborhoods share some of their recollections of what it was like growing up in, your case, Audrey and Nick, North Leominster. Mm-hmm. Now, before you begin sharing your memories, I grew up in Leominster, and I was from the Central Street neighborhood. And to me, North Leominster was over the bridge. That was North Leominster. And I have to admit that it wasn't until I was an adult that I got Main Street and North Main Street straight in my mind. I always thought North Main Street was on the way to North Leominster. No, right? It's North Main Street is on the way to Fitchburg, and that's Route 12, and Main Street is Route 13 on the way to North Leominster. Am I
You are absolutely right. Yes,
correct?
you have it.
And it is somewhat confusing. We're locating the neighborhood of North Leominster, and by the way, there isn't a sign up yet, but there will be one eventually.
I like those signs.
I think you have to give the credit to the mayor and Pat LaPointe and DPW.
I think it adds a lot.
It certainly does. North Leominster does North Leominster include Whalum and Kings Corner too?
I believe so.
I think so.
I consider it part of North Leominster.
And as far as where it starts, I almost think it would be at the intersection of 12 and 13, before you get to the cemetery. I think of that area as being North Leominster too. I mean, I know they called it the Plains.
The Plains, yeah. I didn't consider that.
You didn't?
I think it was always from my after the bridge. After the bridge.
Mm-hmm. After the bridge, which is the bridge we're referring to is I recently learned it's called the Great Bridge. That's and it's the 1872 bridge over the granite bridge over the Nashua River.
Right.
And then under the bridge, under the railroad bridge, and you're up in North Leominster, that section of town. We know where North Leominster is. During what era did you? Can you sort of date the time? Was it you were kids during what time? Post-World War II?
Well, I've lived in North Leominster just about all my life. So I went to school, I went into first grade in 1936, and then the memories that I have are mostly in the 40s, and then, of course, in the 50s with my own children. So I've been there just about all my life. And I think you have too.
I've lived there all my life, yes. Except for the 2 years I was in the service, I was always right in that general area. And I guess I was born in 32. And
I knew you were going to bring up that you were the younger of the two.
I start to recollect things somewhere around 35, 36. I remember the hurricane of 36. That's kind of the focal point of the first big thing I remember.
So we know where and we know when. Did you, as kids, did you travel much out of your neighborhood to other sections of Leominster, or did you lived your life pretty much within the neighborhood?
Pretty much within the neighborhood, I'd say.
Mine was right in the neighborhood.
Yeah, I didn't get around.
All around. And all my friends were in the neighborhood. All our activities were there. The only time I went out of the neighborhood, we'd probably go to the movies.
Downtown.
That's downtown. Yeah.
So it was a big deal going downtown in those days, where today we take transportation is taken for granted. Today, families sometimes have 2-3 cars. In those days, maybe a family didn't have a car. What was transportation like?
I was going to mention that because I remember back, I'd say when I was 8, 9 years old, sitting on the front porch, and we'd see if we could count 10 cars in an hour.
Wow.
And we never could do it. We always tried. That was kind of a game we had. There were so few cars on the road.
10 cars in an hour.
In an
Now
hour.
if you go
Oh,
to
go North Leominster
10
now.
cars in a minute.
Gridlock, right, yes.
Gridlock.
And of course, we had the trolley cars. that
Oh,
were
yes,
going-
absolutely. We didn't have the track trolleys, but we had the trackless trolleys,
Trackless
rubber
trolleys.
tired trolleys. They still use the overhead wires that the track trolleys did.
Ah,
We had those for a while, because I remember riding them up until I was probably 12 years old.
and was that Fitchburg and Leominster Street railway?
Railway, yes.
The track trolleys. So,
Right.
so there was a very good system of public transport in those
And
days.
people used it too.
Oh.
I mean, mothers
Yeah.
didn't have cars. And maybe if there was a car, there'd be one. in
If
the
if you were very fortunate,
Yeah,
you had
and
one
they-
car.
I can remember my mother going to meetings and things, taking the bus.
Right.
And of course, we took the bus everywhere we went.
And during the war, there was gas rate rationing.
Yeah, oh,
And if you
yes.
did have a car,
That's
you had to be
right.
very careful when you used it, because you didn't have the gas.
Yes,
That's right.
to put in it. By any chance, do you remember what the trolley fare was? I know this isn't a fair question, but, well, it is a fair question, the trolley fare.
No, I
But
don't.
what-
I can
what
only
bus-
add one thing. When I went to junior high school, we could buy a 5-cent ticket to get from North Leominster to the school.
We call them car tickets.
Car tickets, a
Car
little
tickets.
red ticket used to buy in the Selig's
And I think
drugstore.
they were a nickel or something like that, were they?
Yeah, 5 cents.
And were there school buses as such too, or were?
I think there were school buses, but they didn't encompass until I got to junior high school,
I see.
because otherwise I could walk.
Now, you mentioned school. Which schools? What was it? Pierce Street School, which was the school, the elementary school at that time?
Well, it wasn't Pierce Street, it was Pierce School.
Pierce School.
But actually, this is something I wanted to say. When I went to Pierce School, it was called Purse School.
Purse School.
And I think it was named after someone in the Purse family, and I think it was Purse Street and Purse School.
Oh.
And gradually it changed. And I remember talking to Marion Foltz, who was a longtime resident of Leominster, and she was a Purse. And I said to her, I always thought it was Purse. And she said, well, it was. And the Purse family came from Boston, and she said, we used to have a little verse in the family. And we would say, the name as we say it is Purse, but strangers are fierce, and some call it Pierce, which makes the Bostonians curse. So it really was Purse School.
Purse School.
Do you remember
Good for
this?
you, I don't remember that,
And
Sally, not
what
at
was
all.
Purse spelled the same? It was
It was
pronounced
spelled
as Pierce,
exactly the
but it was
same,
oh,
but we
see,
called
that's
it Purse.
Oh, very, very interesting. Maybe we'll have to do a little bit of research on that, perhaps.
Yeah.
I didn't. I'm learning all kinds of things being on this commission.
But we both went to Purse School, or
Yes,
Pierce
we did.
School. And then, of course, that's when we got out of the neighborhood, when we started to go over to junior high and high school. Then we, made friends all over town. But
That-
when we were real little, it was...
That's pretty much in a previous interview that we did. That's pretty much the pattern. The kids would stay in their neighborhood until they went to junior high to Gallagher, and then
Right.
then they started rub elbows with the other kids in town.
And it's funny because I think no matter how old you get, the people that you went to grade school with have a very special place in your life. You
They do.
keep track of them, and they're very
They do.
special people.
Yes, that's true. That hasn't changed.
No.
That hasn't
No.
changed. So many other things have, but there are other things that haven't changed, and that's one of them that really.
And we
has-
used to have the playground, and we had the boys' side and the girls' side. I don't know if they still do that.
I don't know.
The boys will be over
No.
there, and the girls will be
No, I don't think
here.
they do that
No,
anymore.
that's you mentioned that. When I went to Gallagher, there was a boys' entrance and there was a girls' entrance. I don't know whether that was your experience.
It was-
No, I don't seem to remember that.
I do.
Do you?
I remember the boys were on the, looking at the building, be the right-hand side, and the girls came in the left-hand
Oh,
side.
Yeah,
That's it.
yeah. So, and now it's all mixed. The things, everyday living, such as now today we go to the supermarket sometimes more than once a day. We hop in the car, we go here, there, everywhere. The car really sometimes doesn't get a chance to rest. In those days, groceries, shopping, what did you do?
We were talking about that the other day, Audrey and I, and we tried to pinpoint the stores that we had in North Leominster. You can start up in the Wheeler there.
Well, I remember one right at the bottom of Claflin Street, and this goes back to like the 1930s. And this was Mrs. Goodwin's store. And it was where you could go down and get, just the little things that you needed. And then as we got down to your area, there
And
was
then right across the
Coleman's.
street from my home was the Coleman store, which was great for me. Penny candy days, run across the street.
I remember right where that was.
Yep, Coleman
It's
store.
been remodeled now.
Yes, it's a
Oh,
nice
yeah.
home
Yes,
now.
yes.
I live
You-
right across the street.
Yeah.
You could get Chia City ice cream at Coleman's for 10 cents a pint. And we'd go down and get it and we'd each eat a pint.
And
I
then,
can remember that.
then to go further down, of course, was the old Turnout.
Yes, the
Run
turnout
by
is still
Skipper
there.
Woodard,
Still there,
still there. Back in those years, it was just ice cream, as I recall.
And penny candy.
Penny candy again. But then we got to the big store, and that was Crowley and Walker.
And
And that was on the intersection of Prospect Street and Main Street. And it's where the bank is right now.
Yes, that's
the commercial
right.
bank.
Yeah.
Big
Commerce
store.
Bank.
That was the store, along with Coleman's, that would deliver.
They would actually
And my
deliver.
mother would get on the phone and call in a list, and in the afternoon, one of the boys would bring up all the stuff she ordered.
Yeah. I was saying to Nick the other day, I remember hearing something about something real new. You could go to your computer and put in your list,
Yeah.
and someone would pack the order and deliver it.
Yeah.
I thought that's how it used to
Yeah,
be.
years ago.
I can remember Crowley and Walker coming. My
Right.
mother would order her list. They'd bring it in, put it right on the kitchen table. We had a lot of deliveries in those days because, the mothers really didn't have cars and didn't go out shopping like that. We had bakers. We had
We had
Cushman.
Breadman.
We had,
Breadman, right.
Cushman
And,
Baker, Hathaway Baker. We had the Iceman.
The Iceman.
We had the Fishman. Mr. Wash used to come on Fridays with wonderful
That's right.
fresh fish. And
Vegetable. We used to have a vegetable wagon come to our place.
yeah, yeah, we really did.
The
We had,
food
and
was
we had
up close.
milkmen.
Oh, the milk, of course.
And then when the war came, they delivered every other day instead of every day.
My job when it came to milk was to walk over to Spadara's with a 2-gallon stainless steel bucket, milk bucket, every other day, and pick up 2 gallons of milk.
Is
And that was
right? That's
Spadara's
really-
farm over on Prospect
And I
Street.
suppose that probably wasn't pasteurized or anything. in
I don't
those
believe
days.
so. I think it was whole milk.
Yeah, because I know we had 2 milkmen. We had the front door milkman and the back door milkman.
Well,
And the front door milkman was pasteurized, and the back door milkman was that was LaCroix's dairy, and that at that time wasn't pasteurized.
So, very much different from today where people go to the supermarket. and
Oh yes,
There were, as you said, the bread man and the
Fishman,
fishman,
vegetable
the
and
Iceman.
milkman. Now, the Iceman, because people had ice boxes, right?
Oh,
And
yes.
the refrigeration, we have, electric refrigerators today, but in those days,
Yeah,
man
it was
came
all an
with
ice
a
box.
block of ice.
Had it on his
Right.
back, yeah.
you used to put a little thing in your window.
Yes,
And if it
little
was
cars.
turned one way, it'd be for 25 pounds, 50 pounds, 100 pounds, something like that.
Yeah, I'd
'Cause I remember
forgotten
I
about
used to-
that.
I used to change it after my mother put it in, and the Iceman would come up with 100 pounds, and he'd be so mad. I had to go back down.
And I can remember going out. We had an ice pick,
Yeah, yeah.
and doing that and getting a little sliver of ice, to eat.
And you were probably satisfied with that.
Oh, that was a
That was a
treat. And then when you got electric refrigerators and you were able to have ice cream all the
Oh.
time, I mean, that was like unheard of. It was wonderful.
Yeah.
Real luxury.
Yeah.
And we used to have mail delivery twice a day, too.
Back
Remember
in
that?
those days, morning and afternoon.
I remember that.
Yeah, they'd come at 11 o'clock and then they'd come again at 2.
And yes, I remember that. That's changed. I also remember as a kid, cereal boxes you'd send away for something, and
Yes, the code rings,
and I would
all
wait.
those wonderful
Yeah,
things.
I would wait for the mailman, being impatient at that time, I would wait for the mailman to come and check the mail every day to see
Sure.
if that little
Oh,
thing
yes.
had come from
Get your
the-
little off and Annie
Yeah,
ring and
yeah.
all those wonderful things you could send away for. Do you remember that?
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
Oh, sure. One thing before we leave the ice thing, Harris Ice Company was right down the street.
Yes.
You probably know where
Yeah,
that is.
yeah.
Right down from the turnout on the opposite
Yes.
side of the road. And they had their farm where they kept the horses above us, about half a mile up the street from me on the left-hand side going toward Whalen. And they had 4 or 5 horses and they had wagons. And every morning at 6 o'clock, I slept in the front part of the house, in my house, and I could hear the click-clock coming down the street as the wagons came down to pick up their ice and go out and deliver.
Wow, that's a nice memory. That is sort of a sound from the past and
That
kind of
is
a pleasant sound.
That was a pleasant, it used to wake
Pleasant
me up in the
sound.
morning and I'd look out and see those horses go
Just,
up and down.
and this has no connection to North Leominster, but you mentioned how a sound brings back a memory. I grew up on Central Street, right next to Route 12, and in the wintertime, one of the sounds I remember was the sound of the chains on the cars
Oh, yes,
as
yes,
they were
yes,
going
yes.
by,
Yeah.
and that sound is gone, just like the clip-clop of horses is gone.
Right.
The sound of chains on
Cars
cars is
gone.
gone because people don't really put chains on
Yeah, and
cars
I
anymore.
remember
That was
this.
kind of a pleasant sound to me.
Yeah, I remember the sounds of the trains too. We used to have a
Ooh.
lot more trains then, and I lived on Main Street, and there was like a field, and then the railroad track. And I remember when, well, we called them tramps. I suppose they were hobos or men of the road or whatever,
Yeah.
but they would come up, jump off the trains, come up through the field, and knock on our back door and see if my mother had any chores or work to do. And she usually didn't, but she'd make them a sandwich. And I can remember them sitting out there and eating the sandwich, and we weren't the least bit afraid as kids.
And that would have been in the
That would have been
30s.
30.
late 30s,
When
I'd say,
that
yeah, or
was-
middle 30s maybe,
And
38.
That was because the Depression
Yes,
was, and
yes.
these men were out of work,
Yes,
and they would
and
travel.
because we didn't have any sense of fear at all. I mean, it was just, oh, here's another tramp coming,
That's it.
and my mother made him a sandwich.
Right.
That
Yes.
was, and I do remember too that the trains occasionally would throw off sparks and it would light the
The old,
field.
yeah, the old
And-
steam engines.
Yeah, and I remember one time there was a terrible fire in North Leominster, all down Prospect Street and Main Street. Some of the people were packing their bags. They thought it was going
To
to come up and get
evacuate?
the house. It was that bad. Remember?
I got a story about that.
Yeah, I
You
do.
remember the Hansons built their beautiful home
yes,
up there?
oh,
Well, he
yes.
had they were building it, and they had all the lumber stacked out in the back, and this fire consumed it. He's talking
Is
about.
that right?
That's
Oh, I
right. It
didn't
held back
realize
the
that.
building of that house for a while.
Oh, my.
Started by
By the fire from the train, that same
Yeah.
grass fire
It
she's
was
talking
quite
about.
frightening because, you know, it would get out of control pretty quickly.
And again, that was the era of the steam engines, and the steam engines. And now we
Absolutely.
have the electric and the diesel.
Yes,
So
yeah.
that has changed.
But
And,
I do
and as
remember
you
the
said,
trains.
the trains used to. Well, they used to run on a regular. Well, they run on a regular schedule now, but they were much more
They were
used. Much more used. Now the trailer trucks, the big trailer 18-wheelers have replaced those.
Right.
Pretty much.
But we'd go to Boston once in a while. My father, I'll go down to the train station in North Leominster and hop on a train to Boston. It was quite a thrill for a young kid.
Ah,
And he
I
always-
remember my father saying, they call this train the Minuteman, and that's because it goes 60 miles an hour. And I thought, wow.
that's a big deal. Yes,
So we went to Boston on the Minuteman, too.
There you go, right.
These experiences and recollections you're sharing, Audrey and Nick, are great.
It's fun to think about it, isn't it?
It is.
To reminisce.
A long time ago.
What about, now we're talking about the grocery stores and so on. What about entertainment? I know
We
you
used
had
to
radio. I vaguely remember, I was born in 1942, and don't really remember listening to a lot of radio. I probably did around with the
yes.
family. And then TV came in, and I remember a little teeny TV. But what about in that era? You had radio, of course, and was that a very popular medium of entertainment?
Very popular.
It wasn't my house.
Oh, it certainly wasn't my house. My father controlled the radio for his news things early in the evening, or late in the evening. Early in the evening, we'd watch Tom Mix, and there'd be the Shadow Knows, and I can't think of how many there were. And they were all
One Man's
serialized, so
Family, and
you get one after the other, but we looked forward to that.
Radio dramas and,
Yes.
and comedies, radio
Right.
comedies.
And my favorite night was Sunday night because at 7 o'clock it was Jack Benny, and we always had to make Jell-O. We ate because that's what he had done. So we ate our Jell-O and we listened to Jack Benny, and then there was Charlie McCarthy after that and
That's right.
something else. But I remember my mother saying, you know, someday we'll be able to listen to Jack Benny and we'll also be able to see him. And I said, well, will he be here? Oh, no, he won't be here in this room. But somehow we'll be able to see him. I couldn't imagine anything as miraculous as
And
that.
she was right.
Yes.
She was right.
Right.
Today we have television and videos and video games and so on. But you kids had to pretty much make your own entertainment, right? And you maybe went to the movies once in a while.
Movies on Sunday afternoon. I
Yes,
think my mother and father just wanted to get rid of us. And then most of the other time we'd play with the neighborhood kids.
Yeah, we had a
Kick the can and
good time
yeah.
in the neighborhood
Oh,
then. I
we
mean,
did.
we played games. I remember going out after supper. We played red light, kick the can. We'd do acrobatic stunts on the lawn. I mean, we had
Just about
fun
everything.
playing.
Yeah, a lot of fun.
I mean,
Had a lot of
but
fun.
there were no organized sports.
Not really.
No, it was just
You,
getting
you mean you kids just didn't go out of the house and just sit and,
Oh,
and wait for
no.
something to
No,
happen?
no,
I'm
no,
being
we-
facetious, of
No,
course. I know
There was
people
always
entertain
always
themselves.
something going on.
And
Right.
you know,
You,
it
and
was
you had
a-
a great time. You had
It
fun.
was a wonderful place for sports too. I mean, in the wintertime, we could go sliding on you went on Burridge
Burridge
Avenue,
Avenue.
but I went on Eastern Avenue, Lincoln Street, Claflin Street. There wasn't any traffic. So we all would take our sleds and go sliding down and those hills in those days were steep. And when I look at them now, they're not.
I know.
But we had so much fun. We would go sliding every afternoon, whether it was snow in the winter, and then we'd skate. And
Oh, we had great skating places.
I can remember going up Claflin Street and through Beers' backyard and through the orchard, and
That's a
we'd
nice-
over
right.
to, they called it Little Pond and Big Pond, and I don't know if it's still there, but they used to build bonfires at Big Pond, and the boys would play hockey and the girls would skate, and down the
Back
corner
of
of Day Street.
Day Street and Main Street, back of Reagan's
used to-
house,
yeah.
we had his pond there, a
Yeah,
little
we
small
call
pond.
that Clark's.
That was Clark's, okay.
And I can remember on Christmas, a lot of us would get skates for Christmas, and I think I told you the girls would get little skating skirts on them, and we'd go down to Clark's and skate, and the boys would play hockey, and the girls would skate around, and we had a wonderful
It
time.
sounds wonderful.
And there were a lot of kids in the
Oh,
neighborhood.
we had so many young people in the neighborhood. As I got older and we got into World War II, a lot of the boys went off to the service. So we didn't have that group of older boys around. We kind of lost that group altogether. But we did have a great group of people my age.
And my age,
yes.
too, yeah, and older.
And we intertwined a little bit.
Yeah.
I used to play with her husband in different games. And then we talked about other people we'd meet along the way.
And then in the summer, of course, we'd all go swimming up to
Oh, up
Whalen.
to
There was
Whalen,
Gray's
sure.
bathhouse and the ABC bathhouse,
Right.
and that was, we'd go up there almost every afternoon.
That was an interesting point you made about Gray's bathhouse. They always had the Red Sox game or the Braves game on the radio
Yeah,
in the
yeah,
background. So you never get bored. You can
No,
listen to the game, swim, come
Yeah,
back
just
out.
a lot of activities. Saw all your friends in the ball game beyond. They had that big, tall tower where you could
Oh, yes.
jump off or dive off if you were
Right.
good enough.
Oh, brave enough.
Whalum was booming at that time.
Yes.
That was
Yeah,
a fun
absolutely.
place then.
We have at the commission some aerial photographs taken by Arthur Bedoin of the Whalum area, and what a marvelous park. And it must have been wonderful in those days.
It was.
And,
I mean, we'd go up there and go on the rides.
We were so fortunate to be so
Yeah.
close.
And then they had
for-
that wonderful playhouse there for so many years
Right.
with all big stars and the dances. I mean, I
And they
remember
had big
going
name bands up at
Louis
the...
Primo was there
yeah,
one night. I remember
right.
going.
They,
It was fun.
it was a great place. We have to fight with our parents once in a while to get out there for some of the dances and things.
Yeah, you
During
couldn't
the day.
always.
Yeah, during the
you
day.
had to talk your way into going to
Right,
some of the
right.
things.
But during the day, you could get up there.
And then, of course, that tornado. I think it was 38, wasn't it, when we had the tornado,
The
hurricane,
hurricane.
and it just destroyed so many trees at Whalen. Did
Oh,
it
it
get the
took-
roller coaster too?
I don't think so,
remember,
but-
oh, it was just devastating. And I can remember sitting on my front steps the next day, watching the cars go by to go see the damage. It was just a steady stream of cars that day.
Yeah, because everybody wanted to see
everybody
what was
wanted to see
going
it.
on.
But that was added a lot, I think. And the roller skating rink.
Oh, that was a fun
We went
place.
roller skating a lot too, and that was fun.
I remember as a child, it was as a treat. Sometimes my parents would take me up, we'd go for a ride at Whalum for ice cream, and one of the things would be to just watch the skaters and
Yes.
That's
listen
right.
to the
Oh,
organ
yes.
music.
It was
Just
live organ
They'd have
music.
the
You have
live organ
wonderful
music.
organ music,
They'd
and you
have-
just stand and watch them
they,
go around.
They had the shutters, the big
Open.
open, and
Yes.
people would just stand there and watch the skaters and listen to the music. It was beautiful. A summer evening,
Right.
Yeah,
and
yeah, it was great. And another thing we used to do, I used to anyway, was ride my bicycle. I mean, every afternoon after school. And it was very safe to ride along Main Street, and I'd ride up to Prospect Street and, my friend's house, and did a lot of bike riding over to Lunenburg, and we really had a good time.
it sounds like it was,
Oh, it was a fun time. It really
sounds
was.
like it was a really fun time.
Yes.
Wonderful time to be growing up.
Yeah, it was.
Are there any other memories, particular memories that you'd like to, I know you spoke to each other a little bit previous to this interview about what you were going to say. And are there any other particular things that you'd like to share with people of the present, Leominsterites of the present, our audience, and Leominsterites of the future?
Well, you were going to tell about all the different farms that we had.
Yes,
That would be most interesting.
Right. Starting up toward your way was Freddie Johnson's farm. That would be on the left-hand side going toward Whalum, where pretty much where Keystone Drive goes down now. There was a farm in there.
Yeah.
And why I remember that farm in particular is that I saw a cow being born. And I was just a young person at the time, and it was quite interesting. And the veterinarian would kind of explained it to my brother and I, what was happening.
Right.
So I'll always remember that. And then, of course, there was always the apple orchard.
Yes,
Uncle.
that was my Uncle Elmer's apple orchard, Elmer Fitzgerald, the Fitzgerald fruit farm. So that was quite a, what would you say, landmark in North Leominster. They had a lot of apple trees, and he sent apples, all over the country.
And every Halloween, he'd have a big Halloween party in his barn.
In the barn, remember that?
And it was all the locals would be there. It'd be so much fun.
It
was all just, nothing official, no tickets or anything.
And he made cider.
Yes, and just all go up there and have a great time in the fall.
Yeah.
Sounds wonderful.
He was a very nice man. He had a very nice family man, too.
Yes, he was.
And then you worked down, there was a Clover Hill farm that was gigantic.
That.
But I think that was in Lunenburg.
Just up by King's Corner.
Yeah.
Clover Hill stand was right there at King's Corner where we could go for our ice cream.
Right, but the farm itself, I think if you go down Day Street toward Lunenburg.
The Clover Hill farm is
I think it's in Lunenburg.
Yes.
But that was a big thing in our time.
I remember my first association with Clover Hill was at the ice cream stand, because I remember the giant bottle of milk.
Yes.
And if you look up there now, it's a video store, but you can still
where it
see
used
the
to be.
lower
That
part of the bottle.
That's right.
But they have giant milk bottles.
Yeah,
Right.
that was there for many years.
And then we go from that farm, we'd go down. People don't remember this, and I don't think Audrey picked up on it, but at the intersection of Day Street and Main Street, there was a schoolhouse there. There's a Cumberland Farms or something like that now. And just in back of that where the school is, it was Smith's farm. Now, he didn't have any cows or anything, but he had animals like goats and pigs and chickens and things like that.
This is where the Johnny Appleseed
School
is
is
now.
right now.
Yes.
He had a big barn there and a big home, but I don't believe he had cows there. But it was someplace interesting to go to see the little small animals.
And then, of course, Derby Farm. I mean,
Oh,
I think
that's
that would
right.
be in North Leominster. It's way down on Harvard Street,
Yes.
and near where Route 2 is. But I can remember when they had just fields and fields of asparagus. And the boys used to go down and they'd be out in the fields cutting the asparagus, and the girls would work inside. We'd bunch the asparagus.
Yeah.
We made 50 cents an hour, and that was my first
time. Right.
first money. But I always remember Derby Farm. I mean,
Yes.
that was fun too.
It sounds so wonderful.
I think one of the negative memories that I have of North Leominster was the Nashua River. The Nashua River really smelled terrible.
It was.
And the colors, I mean, it was awful. And I remember my friend's father, who grew up around here, of course, many years before we did, said, at one time we used to be able to go canoeing on the Nashua River. I thought, I don't believe it. I mean, it was awful. So I think the cleaning up of the Nashua River is probably the most wonderful thing that has happened to North Leominster. It was awful.
We talked about sounds, remembering from childhood. That's a smell I remember from
Oh,
childhood, because
well, you couldn't forget.
I remember the Nashua River when it was awful, when it was polluted, and the colors too. When the dyes would be, sometimes it would be bright. It could be orange. It could be a bright blue. Whatever
paper they were making that day.
And that is one of the positive things that has been cleaned up, and people can again canoe on it.
But when I tried to picture canoeing on the Nashua River, I couldn't picture it. So it's wonderful.
Right. In those days, it would be hard to contemplate anyone wanting to get anywhere near the water. Because I remember that. Yeah.
And then another thing was Kendall Hall. That was
a great focal point for
lot
Boy
of
Scouts.
activity there. We had Cub Scout meetings there.
Cub Scouts.
Boy Scouts. There was a library there at one time.
Oh, I didn't know
Yeah,
We used to
downstairs.
vote there.
Right.
It was the precinct for voting at one time. Of
That's-
course, you couldn't vote there now. I mean, the staircase
Oh, you
is
could never
probably
get in.
35
Right. But,
stairs to get up there. But
and the firemen were always helpful.
Oh,
They were right there at
yeah,
the station,
yeah.
and they would help you out.
So
Yeah.
there was a fire station there in Kendall Hall.
Just
at that
as there
time.
is,
Yeah,
just
yeah.
there is today.
But the
As there is
upstairs
today.
room was, we used that for so many
Public functions.
things.
And,
Yeah.
yeah.
And that's
That-
quite a
that-
memory, Kendall
that's,
Hall.
That's an historic,
Yeah,
historic
it is.
building. Yeah. And,
I'm glad they fixed the
they
tower.
fixed the tower, the
bullfinch.
clock.
Yes.
Yeah, the bullfinch.
That was very
and,
nice.
and,
When I was a kid, I used to climb up there. It
Oh.
was kind of scary, but it was
Well,
fun.
that's good to know, Nick, because we're looking for somebody to go up and check on the clock twice a year, so.
I don't think my legs would take it. Not now.
But it was a fun place to grow up. It really was.
Just before we conclude this interview, and it's been most interesting to me, and I've learned a lot, and you've done a wonderful job.
Oh, my goodness.
You mentioned the turnout, and it's there today, and it's a variety store, newspapers and so on, a little restaurant. Was there some connection between the turnout and the trolley or the trains? And I'm leading you into this because I know there
Right.
was.
Yeah, you know the answer.
I know the answer.
Yes.
Would you tell us, please?
Well, I'm not too good at it because it was before my time when they had the track trolleys, and that's when they needed the turnout. So that the trolley coming from Leominster to Wayland and the trolley from Wayland to Leominster would kind of meet there, and one of the trolleys would go off on the turnout. That's where the turnout came.
Because there was only one track.
Right, only one track in the middle of the road.
Okay,
And one
so
would turn out, and the other one would go through, and then the other one would back out, or however they did it, and go
that was
about its
where
business.
the turnout
Yeah,
was.
and that's called the turnout.
that's,
But when I was growing up, the tracks had gone, and the regular trolleys could get out of each other's way. That's all they'd have to do is come out, pull those wire things down, because there was only one set of wires. He'd pull them aside, pull his bus over. The other one would go through with the wire. Then he'd put his wire back, his back thing back on the wire and take off.
and the trolley was the electric.
Yeah, that's where they picked up their power from overhead.
When I grew up on Central Street, it was paved, the tad, but I do remember seeing once in a while when the tar would wear, I could see rails. So there must have been a trolley line there.
Oh, I'm
but
sure.
the little street next to me, I sort of remember that it wasn't paved. Were there a lot of unpaved roads still in the when you were growing up in the 30s?
I'm sure there were. I don't remember them, but I'm sure there must have been.
But the main routes were.
All the Main Street was
Yeah.
always paved,
Yeah.
and Claflin
Yes.
Street, Prospect
Yeah,
Street.
Yeah. I suppose out in the country, maybe.
But there was still, as you mentioned, there was mostly a lot of farms. Farms, open space.
I didn't cover that. There's a Woods Farm over on the end of Pierce Street,
Yeah.
after the Harris Farm
That's
up on the
right.
hill
Yeah.
on
yeah.
Jocelyn Street. We had a lot of farms, a lot of animals, a lot of cows.
And those were working farms.
Yes, they were.
Well, Nick and Audrey, it sounds like you had a wonderful childhood. And to conclude this installment of Leominster, A Present to the Future, Audrey and Nick, many thanks for adding to our historical record. Today you were sharing your recollections of growing up in North Leominster, not only with our audience of the present and me in the present time, but you were also talking to people well into the future by making this Leominster Access television presentation possible. To conclude, as always, many thanks to Carl Pimerini and Jack Selly and all the folks at Leominster Access TV for all their expertise and work. Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you.
It's very nice to be here. I enjoyed it.
I
Same
agree.
here. Great job.